Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. It is exactly 9:15 this morning. A big welcome to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. Still to come, we're going to be talking to Bulelani Balabala. He is an entrepreneur and founder of Township Entrepreneurs, and we're going to be looking at soft skills to help South African youth with employment. Is that feasible at all? Well, we'll hear what he has to say. But first up, I'm going to be talking to S'bu Zikode. He is with Abahlali, and that, of course, he's also the president of the Shack Dwellers Movement of South Africa. We're going to be talking about a conference that started yesterday. Today, they'll be continuing, and it's all about this coalition against strategic lawsuits against public participation. We're going to refer to it as SLAPPs throughout the conversation this morning. Good morning, S'bu. Welcome to the program.
A very good morning to you and good morning to your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. So let's understand. You're not at the conference right now because you're busy talking with me. How did the first day go, hopefully according to plan? And why do you think that this coalition is kind of almost moving against the issue around public participation? How important, I guess the all important question is, how important is public participation, and why does government want to shut it down?
Well, Julie and the listeners, you would understand that public participation is part of our pillars of our democracy. So in no ways our democracy can flourish and grow without public participation. Hence, it is important for civil society organizations, grassroots and democratic formations to actually come together to make sure that we advance the democratic values of our new dispensation. And part of trying to do that, obviously, is to come up with the coalition against the strategic lawsuit against public participation, meaning that our democracy is under serious threats without organizations and civil society formations coming together to actually strengthen the democratic values. So yesterday, the day began to actually look into what can each organization offer, what are some of the reflections, of our past, what has been happening, what is it that actually makes us to convene today to actually see this moment as an important moment for us to convene and make sure that we act against any shrinking of civil society space. And the day yesterday went very well. There were a number of contributions from various organizations representing their respective organization, not only in South Africa, but in Southern Africa and Africa as a whole, to actually say, what is it that we can do? What kind of power do we have as democratic formations, as civil society, but also as social movement? What is it that we can do together, which embraces the culture of solidarity and internationalism? And it became important that, therefore, in the region, we can come up with this coalition, which will also have some kind of link, connection, and solidarity with international communities as well.
Okay, so you're a civil society organization with no, I suppose, wanting to form a political party, with no ambitions for a political party at all. Basically, can we just ask my controller to put back that strap line on? Because I want to indicate exactly who you are and whose interests you are representing. You are the president of Abahlali, baseMjondolo movement of South Africa. That's the Shack Dwellers. How big is this Shack Dwellers movement? Undoubtedly, they're big enough. They do have a lot of punch, do they not?
Well, Julie and the listeners, the Shack Dwellers movement of South Africa, Abahlali, actually began 18 years ago in 2005 in one of the shack settlements in.
Okay, I think we've just lost S'bu there. His picture has frozen. Let's take a quick short break whilst we reconnect with him.
Salam Media.
No one wants to let go of that feeling of closeness to Allah that we feel by the end of Ramadan. Ramadan is over, but that closeness doesn't have to be. The deeds most loved by Allah are those done regularly, even if they are small. So don't let go of that feeling. Give a small amount regularly and hold on to Allah's love. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
Help us ease the hunger burdens of those in need by donating to the Sanzaf Meals Project. For just 12 Rand, you can provide a freshly prepared meal to an individual, and with your commitment to a monthly contribution, we can reach out to even more communities and deserving individuals. Call us on 011 834 6046 to learn more about this life-changing initiative. Sanzaf, changing lives through development and relief.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
9:22 on News and Views right here on Salam Media, and S'bu Zikode is back with us. He is the president of the Shack Dwellers Movement of South Africa. Interestingly, S'bu, I see that you're not only talking about your rights as Abahlali, the conference is also addressing the safeguard to the rights of journalists, activists, which you obviously are, and watchdog organizations. So it's really all encompassing, is it not?
Well, absolutely. It is really exciting that at last we are all seeing a need to come together, because there is some realization that none of us can actually win and deal with the challenges that are facing South Africa and Africa at large when we would have to work in isolation to others. Hence, the coalition becomes so key that we come together and use all our wisdom, our strength, our resources, our numbers, and the love of humanity coming together. So it is on the basis of this humanity that we think we can actually achieve a lot when we actually come together. Whether it's shack dwellers, whether it's NGOs, whether it's grassroots formations, or even labor movements. So everyone has a role to play. Hence, the coalitions are so important for us to win greater achievements when we work together.
So when you form coalitions with all of these other organizations, you have a bigger voice, and your voice has to be heard. Let's understand what the Southern African Resource Watch and the Benchmarks Foundation brought to the table yesterday.
Well, these organizations obviously have experts within them, have experiences, have resources. So they have brought some research that actually helped us all, particularly in South Africa and Africa at large, to look into some of the experiences that we can draw from the region, but also internationally, and also how we can build their coalition to also talk to, but also meet to the international standards that already exist. What are other best practices that other international communities have been able to achieve in the fight against the lawsuit against public participation? So their experience, obviously, on the side of research in particular, and the ability, of course, to throw some of the resources that are needed for a coalition to get off the table.
Let's understand when this lawsuit against public participation came to light and what was your thoughts at the time. And I hear and I do understand how important it is for you guys to form a coalition, because your voices singularly would be too small to be heard. So forming these coalitions is definitely going to give you a stronger voice. But when did this come to light, and how does it impact on Abahlali in particular? How would it impact on you guys?
Well, I must say that as Abahlali, we weren't aware, obviously, of the SLAP, these strategic lawsuit against public participation, but it has manufactured itself in many forms. For instance, in Abahlali's experiences, there has been a number of trumped up charges that has been brought against Abahlali members. A lot
By whom? By whom?
By both the state and corporations. But what we have discovered is that the corporations have been smart enough to hide behind the politicians. So we see politicians, and at times we have a lot of tension with government, only to discover that there are big corporates behind. These politicians are actually protecting the interests of businesses. You would have seen how in the land occupation, for instance, how the so-called red ants in Johannesburg, the land inversion units in Durban, the law enforcement agencies in the city of Cape Town have been really moving so harsh on poor Black people who are landless, only to discover that this is not in the best interest of the country, but it's in the best interest of the corporates. And therefore, we find the very same public figures using public resources to advance and protect the interest of the minority who have massive wealth of this country. So obviously, you would understand that Abahlali have lost 24 activists to assassinations. Whistleblowers and many housing land rights activists have been really attacked in many ways. Some continue to face charges that are fake in many ways, but also people have lost their lives. So these strategic lawsuit against public participation manifests itself in different formations. So Abahlali experience speaks volume because 24 activists have been murdered with impunity because there isn't really some sense of government being compelled to protect the rights of human rights defenders, so to speak. So yesterday we've had a lot of experiences of individual journalists, people within the environmental sector who are fighting against extractivism and so on, having to fight these big corporates. And we've seen activists such as Mama Njangase in KZN, Bazooka Hadebe in the Eastern Cape, who have been murdered by these big corporates who would just hire hitmen. That's the extreme to which these lawsuits against public participation ends up doing to humanity.
What is that lawsuit against public participation is going to prevent you guys from doing? Is it protesting, taking to the streets? Is it only about that, or is it more devious than that?
Well, there is more onto it, but what it's primarily wanting to achieve is to threaten activists from speaking the truth to power. It narrows our democracy, and it is an attack on our democracy. It is an attack on the freedom of free expression. It is an attack of freedom of association and other rights that are not only enshrined in our constitution, but also international laws. So it is on the basis of that the coalition has come up with the action that we should be standing up, campaign, lobby, educate ourselves, but also equip ourselves in making sure that we challenge this lawsuit against public participation, because all it does, it really an attack on our democracy. It attacks the very right that was fought so hard for us to have a voice today. We know that journalists' voices are being shut down. The civil society spaces is being shamed in many ways, so that we don't see that there is a deliberate attempt to shut down our democratic spaces in Africa.
And just to clarify something on air right now, is you here talking about obviously the strategic lawsuits against public participation, but you do represent the shack dwellers movements of South Africa. And we do know that the shack dwellers have experienced lots and lots of hardship. So it's not really about the shack dwellers that we're talking about. We're talking about this in a very blanket arena, covering all activists, whether it's journalists, civil rights movements, etc., etc. But surely, if our basic human rights to free speech is enshrined in our constitution, something like this shouldn't even have seen the light of day. Something like a lawsuit against public participation should not have seen the light of day, and we shouldn't be giving it any traction by even discussing it. Your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is very worrying. It is concerning. It is devastating that almost 30 years of our democratic dispensation in South Africa and in Africa as a whole, many of these African countries have gained independence far earlier than we as South Africans, but we are all stuck into this conversation. It's really hurting that we have to have such conversation, because if we do not have, we would regret having to lose a very hard-won democracy that has all these pillars, institutions that are guiding our democratic practice. But the political landscape is changing, as we are seeing that our political spaces are now being hijacked by gangster politicians, by business people who would really want to put the interest of profit ahead of that of humanity. So these are the reasons why we have to stand up, that we are pro-democracy, but also making sure that the human needs comes before that of profit. Now you see our politics are really occupied by business people who have no regards for service delivery in our communities, who have no regards for human rights, for that matter, whose primary aim is to accumulate profit over human needs, which then undermines the human rights that were hardly fought for, not only in South Africa, but internationally. So it is important, therefore, that the coalition really convene and find more strategies and knowledge as to how we can fight against any form of attack to our democratic dispensation.
Okay, I want to understand what is the main point of this lawsuit against public participation, because does this relate to a protest taking to the streets? Because not too long ago, Abahlali was also, I think the national shutdown not too long ago, Abahlali was also threatening to take to the streets, but stated very categorically that it will be a very peaceful demonstration. So what exactly is this lawsuit saying? And if and when Abahlali did in fact take to the streets, was it in fact a peaceful demonstration?
Well, absolutely. Abahlali had a very successful, peaceful, and unbelievable protest, which became known as the Unfreedom Day protest. There were more than 7,000 people marching peacefully in the streets of Durban on the 26th of April, a day before the so-called Freedom Day that is enjoyed by the few people in this country. But we also have the similar protest in Mpumalanga province in Volkras on the 28th of April, followed by the Gauteng one that was held in Germiston on the 29th of April. All these protests and rallies which were part of the Unfreedom Day, a message to say there is no freedom for the poor, were all peaceful. However, there has been a number of instances where peaceful protests, such as this recent one, were attacked. Not only in the form of protest, we know journalists have been attacked for publicly or for writing articles that are critical to corporation, to the states, to the powerful. So these lawsuits against public participation manifest itself in many ways, not only against protesters, but against the big corporations, such as those that are busy seeking diamonds in our country and leave communities devastated. So those who are exposing truth to power in many ways are under attack. And the idea is to shut down the public opinions, the right to a free expression. So it comes in many ways. But of course, as Abahlali, our primary focus is really our right to free association, our right to organize, our right to protest. But meeting with other organizations, as we had different experiences yesterday, many of the journalists, many of the even lawyers, for instance, are under attack for doing their job of justice and being the officers of the court. We have seen this in many ways in some of our partners who are under attack for representing the poor and the marginalized in our society. And that's what their crime has become. And people are using their power within the political arena. Big corporations are also behind in support of that, so that they shut down the very hope of our democratic praxis in Africa.
S'bu, thank you for the correction there. I referred to that protest by Abahlali as a national shutdown. It wasn't the national shutdown. It was, in fact, Unfreedom Day. And I'm glad to hear that it was very, very successful. We're going to have to leave it there. Before I let you go, is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers this morning regarding the lawsuit against public participation?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, the last thing I would like to say is really to say to the people of South Africa, those progressive formations, the democratic formations that subscribe to our democratic principles, it's high time that we come together. None of us will win any of our battles that confront South Africa and Africa as a whole when we struggle in isolation to others. Let us come together. Together we can achieve a lot. Solidarity is important. In the spirit of internationalism, let's come together and protect what is rightfully ours. Thank you.
S'bu Zikode, President of the Shack Dwellers Movement of South Africa, thank you indeed for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Undoubtedly some sterling and good points will come through and hopefully empower you guys even more. Go well. God bless.
Thank you.
It is exactly 9:39 News and Views right here on Salam Media, and I do believe that we're going to be talking to Crystal Duncan in a minute or two, and we will hear from her which organization she is representing. We're going to be looking at the issue around millions of unemployed youth in South Africa.